Hello. Welcome back to another 343 TV stream. It's Icarus Moth once again, here to say hello. Looks like we got some friendly faces in the chat. Silent State, what's up? Totentans, sup, Serp, Waving to Macali. I'm gonna pronounce all these names wrong. Martin, what's up, dude? Suffist, hey. How are y'all doing today? So welcome back. Hopefully, this is your first time joining us. You have a good time here. We are 343 music program here. We do some online streams. We also have a physical location here in New York City, also one in Berlin. I think we might have some Berliners out here tuning in with us, doing an open house over there, maybe. Hello across the pond. Hope you guys are having a good time over there. I'm Nathan, Icarus Moth. I've done a few streams with you guys before, so if you're tuning back in, you might know what's up and what's about to come. But today we're going to be focusing on a little bit more unconventional sound design, except this time it's going to be more conventional. So if this is something that if you tuned into my non-conventional sound design stream in the past, you're going to see maybe some similar tricks and stuff. But this week we've got actually a Crystallizer as our giveaway. So that's a Sound Toys plugin, and it's one of my favorite tools of all time. So maybe today I'll be able to sneak that in there, show you guys a little bit about what that is about, get you a little excited for that giveaway. Looks like we got Kamikaze Shots. What's up? Some new faces for sure. Some names I don't recognize. Love to see it. So cool. Without further ado, I think we should probably jump in. Waste no time, right? So today, I will tell you, I have been in the process of moving, so I didn't have as much time to put something together to show for you today, but the music we were listening to during the intro there for the screen is a pretty good example of stylistically where we're headed today, kind of like that lo-fi, jazzy sort of hip-hop feeling. However, the stipulation of today is we're going to be using operator or a synthesizer, one single synthesizer, to handle most of our actual sound design, things of this nature. So hopefully we're going to be doing everything from there. If I need to use an audio effect here and there, which I probably will, particularly EQ and saturator, things you have heard me talk about plenty of times in the past, I will use those, but we're going to see how far we can get with operator. So today is definitely a sound design day. I have a little chord progression here that I recorded in that we can use, so you don't have to see me painting some notes, and we have something nice to listen to while we're designing sounds. But like I said, today we're going to be pretty focused on the synthesizer side of things. So let me play this chord progression for you, and then we're going to start putting some drums together for this, and we might also change this synth here, because right now what we're listening to is a default operator. So we've just got a basic sine wave playing through this chord progression here. It's not going to sound the greatest. In fact, maybe just to give you guys a better example here, I will replace this instrument with an electric piano just for the time being, and then we'll switch it back. So here's the progression we're dealing with. And it's going to repeat. So it's a little like R&B, a little like jazz-ish, sort of, if you want to kind of assume that, but it's more kind of on the pop side of things, right? So we're gonna kind of focus on that, but it's got this sort of like lo-fi vibe. So we're gonna kind of lean into that one as well here. So let me replace our instrument back with the operator. And for today, operator is probably going to be my weapon of choice. So everyone kind of has their own synthesizers that they're more comfortable with, right? If you have spent a ton of time in FL Studio, maybe you love Citrus, you know, if you spend time in Ableton in the early days, I bet operator is definitely one of your mainstays. Wavetable's a new one that people are loving. You know, whatever Logic has that is kind of like the default synthesizer stuff that people love to use. Whenever I'm in Logic, I'm using third-party tools, but that's, you know, whatever you're most comfortable with. I recommend you do this same sort of challenge for yourself. It's really cool to see how far you can get with the limitations of, you know, just one tool, things like that. So like I said, maybe you'll see me using some audio effects here, but for the most part, everything is going to be coming from our operator tool here. So this guy is an FM synthesizer, right? FM stands for frequency modulation, which means we get some really cool things that we can do just by virtue of playing around with some of the oscillators over here on the left. So I'm going to be talking my way through how we are going to approach some of these sounds, and we're going to try and make some nice kind of lo-fi drums for this piece of music here. So step one, stop messing with this operator that we're not even getting to yet. In fact, I can even kind of mute these chords for now, because otherwise they're just going to be loud and in our face, and we're going to add a new operator. So I'm going to go in and grab our synth here, and the first thing that I want to start focusing on is a kick drum. The reason for this is because it's going to kind of help me explain what, you know, what we're hearing when we hear a kick drum, and how we can then reapproach that from the perspective of a synthesizer. And it's also going to be kind of like a nice way to get started with a beat for this chord progression here. So really, what is a kick drum when you're thinking about it? So it's a sound that goes from a high pitch to a low pitch fairly quickly, right? So you hear the boom, like the punch of a kick drum. That's that dropping in frequency very quickly. It's also an amplitude thing, right? It starts very loud and then kind of fades out very quickly over time. But that drop in pitch is a really important aspect of that kick drum sound design. Hey, what's up, Simple Sam? Good to see you again. And so we're going to kind of recreate that motion here. And then the rest of what creates the sound of a kick drum is just the textural stuff on top, you know? And so if I wanted to maybe record some sounds around me, that'd be a cool way to add texture to a synthesized kick drum, but we can also do it from the synthesizer. I picked lo-fi because it's going to be a little bit easy for me to get away with lo-fi drums without having to add a bunch of like recordings and textures and audio effects and things like that. But that's pretty much what we're going to be going for. So step one is create the shape of our kick drum just via the envelope, right? We can go in and change our routing in operator later if we want to gain access to these oscillators in different ways. But for now, we're just going to kind of create the shape of a kick drum. And if we look at one in audio, I think, you know, we're all fairly familiar with this kind of a thing. However, you can see it's a very short sound. It's fairly loud and resonant for a little while, and then it fades out very quickly, right? And you can see these are pretty low frequencies. You can tell because the waveform is stretched out. It's pretty big relatively, right? So we're going to try and pretty much mimic that with our envelope here. So we know this is going to be a very short sound, but keep in mind that we don't necessarily want to make it too short, because then we're not going to have an easy time having some of those lower frequency resonances in that kick drum. So we want to find a length of time for this sound that kind of resembles a kick drum, like this. I think somewhere around like 700, 800 is probably going to be good. But just like anytime you've ever seen my sort of sound design creative streams, we're probably going to be changing this one a little bit later as we add more to it anyway. So one thing to note here is if I play this low enough on the piano, it's probably very quiet for you guys, I apologize. Low enough, it almost already resembles a kick drum. It's just missing the oomph, right? Like it's subby, it's bassy, and it's short and kind of punchy, but it doesn't really have the aspect of it that's going to shake my chest. And so that's where our pitch envelope comes in. But there's a couple of things I can do to it first that are also going to help add some texture and some movement to this. So one thing is to run another sine wave into the sine wave that's attached to oscillator A here. And we can make this very short and snappy. And what you'll find that this does is adds a little bit of a click or a punch. Hey, looks like we got Max with the open house squad. I said hi to you guys earlier. I don't know if you were here with me at that point, but welcome, welcome. I'm glad you guys were able to tune in. I hope that everything is going nice over there in Germany. I do plan on being out there with you guys soon, so maybe you'll meet me face to face here in the near future. So yeah, so what I was saying is we can add a little bit of oscillator B to oscillator A in our FM fashion with a short envelope here to add a little bit of that punch to the kick drum as well, right? So there's a sweet spot for this, and some of that's going to be depending on what you like to listen to, what genre we're working on here. You know, a little bit leaves this very round and tonal, whereas adding a lot kind of makes it a little bit too clicky and loses some of those lower frequencies. So like somewhere maybe around 12 o'clock here, because you can still hear it, but it doesn't really like take over the kick drum entirely, right? So right away that helps add, you know, a little bit of punch and a little bit of resonance to the drum. But once again, we're not really necessarily going to get as far as we need to go until we add our pitch envelope. So in operator, that's over here on the right, we've got to engage that. I'm not really sure why this is already at 100%, but if we don't turn up the percentage of this pitch envelope, we're not really going to get much of a effect here, right? 0% means no envelope affecting the pitch. So we could crank this up to 100 if we want to. There's already a default envelope here in the pitch envelope if you guys haven't gone and changed your default operator. And so just like the positioning of oscillator B to add a little bit of punch to our kick drum, this pitch envelope is going to have a few sweet spots kind of depending on what style of music or what style of drum you're trying to create here. And so we're going to kind of tweak these parameters here a little bit until we find said sweet spot, right? So the ones that we really want to pay attention to here are certainly going to be the pitch envelope amount, because that determines how powerful this shape actually applies to the pitch, right? So with a lower percent, there's less pitch movement from the envelope. With 100%, it's a way more. And then we're also going to want to adjust our peak, which is going to change the starting pitch of the drum entirely. So if I raise this up, it's going to start from a higher frequency and then jump down. And we're also going to want to change our decay. Now, if we need to get more room going on this envelope, we could also lower our sustain, but a sustain parameter here on a pitch envelope is a little different from what we're used to, because it's now affecting the resonant pitch that the note holds at when we actually hold a note, which, you know, we can't because we have a very short envelope on our amplitude here. However, sometimes this is going to force whatever tone you think your kick drum to be to play a different pitch than whatever you're playing on the piano. So if you do this, maybe stick within octaves or use your ears, because again, your ears are at the end of the day, you know, going to be the determining factor here. So I'm going to lower the peak. I don't think this needs to be super like psytrance punch style of kick. I'm also not playing this low enough on my piano. Let me start playing this in the kick range, right? Somewhere where the resonant hits around the sub area, like 80 hertz and below, something like that. And now we can start, you know, tweaking these things. So maybe if we raise our peak, here it makes it a little bit snappier. If I lower the peak, softer and rounder, increase the decay, boom, boom, you can start to hear the actual pitch drop over time. But bear in mind, if our decay on the pitch envelope is longer than our decay for the entire sound is, we're going to probably have some issues here, right? We're not really going to get to what we want. So this is one way that we could treat this. And this will ensure that whatever pitch we land on at the end here is tuned to our song, right? This is very much like a hip hop kick. It's very tonal. I could play different notes with this and follow it around kind of like a bass guitar or a bass line. And so that's kind of like a nice point to stop at. If I wanted to turn this into an 808, all I would really have to do is add some extra harmonics, because otherwise we're going to just struggle to hear this on smaller speakers. Maybe something like this, where we have kind of an uneven balance of the upper harmonic series there. And then just increase our envelope, right? Because we need to be able to hold a note. There or get our 808 here. So it's got the little punch at the beginning, and again, that's this pitch envelope, right? So less, rounder, a little bit less pitch movement. Up, we get that big punch. But it's very dependent on our positioning here, right? So we've just taken that kind of soft hip-hop kick drum and with a few tweaks to those parameters I mentioned, turned this into this very big, heavy, like, ooh, I don't even know what genre, like hard style minus the distortion, like old techno, right? It sounded pretty good. So this is certainly not what we're going for this genre. I'm going to kind of soften this a little bit here. But you can hear where we could certainly take that if we wanted to. So I have currently the envelope on our actual amplitude a little bit too long. I want this to be a little bit shorter, maybe a little knockier. This is fine. Now I know it might seem small and insignificant right now, this kick drum. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we kind of move on to sprucing this up a bit, there's one other thing I want to show you about this pitch envelope. The other way that we could kind of handle this is by creating an audio sample with this tool and then kind of cleaning up some of the issues we have with it after we make it audio. So instead of keeping this thing an operator, what we could do is increase the length of our actual amplitude here and then have the pitch envelope drop the kick drum pretty much below audible frequency. Problem with this is we're still going to get some of these really low sub frequencies there when we play the kick drum, and if I play a snappy note because of our release here, it gets a little weird. But this allows the sub frequency of our bass note to go much deeper there, and that will also kind of help resemble some of the more like old school hip hop kicks and stuff. But for now, we're going to stick to what we had. Honestly, the C note here is sounding pretty good. We don't need to worry about tuning our kick drums. Like, I'm sure you guys have seen tons of YouTube videos, half of them titled, "Always tune your kick drums, how to," and then half of the videos titled, "You never need to tune your kick drums." It's a myth. Like, it's all over the place. I'm kind of on the side of just do what sounds good. So we could take a look at what notes we're playing here, like what key of music we're in. It looks like D minor, so maybe we're just gonna play a D note for this kick drum. And I want to put one down on the MIDI grid so that we can start really making a decision about what this kick drum is and where it goes. So instead of just kind of playing random notes on my piano now, I'm actually, determining, hey, I'm going to let this kick drum resonate on a D note here, which makes these a little bit more finite when I actually set them. Looks like we got Karima on the chat, friend of mine. Hello, hello. So once again, I mentioned we might go through here and change these parameters around a little bit just to find that sweet spot. This is fine. And one thing to consider is our operator default. Sometimes it has some issues, right? Our tone is at 70%. That's kind of like it's controlling the high frequencies here. So tone all the way down doesn't allow almost any high frequencies through. You can hear that kind of softens our kick drum because of the frequency or the pitch envelope here. If I increase our tones, allows some of those higher frequencies to bleed through. So be wary of where that's defaulted for you if you are not hearing what you want to hear. And similarly, we have a filter here defaulted at 12 hertz, or a low pass filter defaulted at 12,000 hertz here. And so that's just cutting out anything above 12K. So if you turn that off, then we actually get these clicky frequencies back. And I prefer doing this outside of the operator here. Now, if we wanted to get fancy and, depending on how much time I've taken up already, we could maybe actually use the filter within the kick drum to help this be a little bit nicer. But I'm trying to really just give you the fundamentals of how to start designing some of these drum sounds on our own. So we're gonna keep the filter off, at least for now. Maybe when we get to the texture part of this, we'll turn that back on. But any filtering I'm gonna do to this kick drum, I'm probably just gonna do with an EQ on the outside of it, right? So that's where we'll take care of that stuff. Now, from this point on, we're pretty good to move out of operator if you want to, right? This is a nice, clean, kind of punchy sub-frequency sound, which is really just what a kick drum is. And the only thing we really need to do from here to at least match this up with some of the samples we would have in a sample pack is a little bit of post-processing, right? And if you saw my non-conventional sound design stream, you'll know exactly what I mean there. EQ, saturator, compressor, right? Those are my 3 desert island plugins, or audio effects, I guess is a better term there. And so they can get almost anything done for you. And I know some people are going to watch the way I use these and be like, oh, I hate this. This is terrible. It's giving me a headache. But it's what we do. It's what we do. You got to use your ears, right? So we'll just put these on our channel here for now. And something that we're going to look at while we maybe adjust some of these parameters here to make this kick drum more full and powerful is we have 2 oscillators left over here on our operator, and our kick drum right now is just the punch part of it, right? It doesn't really have any of the textures of a kick drum, and so we could use these other 2 oscillators for that purpose. And now this is where the challenge level on designing drums in Ableton raises itself a little bit. But we can kind of look at some of the things we can do here, and I'm probably going to take it simple for now, but you'll see what I'm getting at here. And we're going to split these 2 oscillators out of the audio routing that we're dealing with here right now. So the default version of operator has D affecting the oscillator on D affecting the oscillator on C, and then the result of that affecting the oscillator on B, and then the result of that affecting the oscillator on A, and then A actually generates the output, right? And so right now we have B messing with A generates signal. If I want a free D and C from B and A, then I got to click on our shapes down here, and along the top here we have different routing options. Now if you see our letters in the boxes here, they have colors that correspond to the different routing options here. So this square option, you can see B processes A generates signal, but then D processes C separately, and C generates signal. So now I kind of have 2 voices, 2 different oscillators at the same time that I can use to work with this kick drum. And so the bottom half, this is going to be the punch. The top half, that's going to be our texture. However, before we get to that top half, I might want to run some processes over here with the saturator and compressor, because they're really going to have a pretty big impact on what ends up going on here with the texture. And I'm going to really want to focus on how I use these based on the lower frequencies here to really make sure that those are resonant in the way and we're getting the distortion from them that we want. So we're going to start with these tools. Now, if we look at this on an EQ, it's actually not too far off from what we should expect to see with a kick drum. However, some FM today. Yeah, Simple Sam, we're doing it. I think Operator is my favorite Ableton tool that they possibly have ever made. It's really, really strong. And we're using like 5 to 10% of the tool to make this happen. We're barely even touching this. Also, I forgot, when we made this in 808, I added some harmonics to this. This is not bad for a kick drum, but it's a little bit much. I would probably let that lower harmonic really still be the most present thing there. Anyway, so we're going to take this EQ, and we're going to use this to really force frequencies we need to become more present and frequencies we no longer need or are too present, maybe like something like that, and pull those down a bit. So you might have seen me doing some pretty serious EQ movements in our non-conventional sound design stream, which I keep mentioning. You're going to see very similar things here. Right? We're definitely heavily changing the balance of our audio here. And something really important to consider, I don't know if zooming works on OBS, but we'll try. We have a meter in between these audio effects, and the meter coming from the operator is nice, plenty of headroom, right? It's not nearly close to red, not nearly close to clipping. But even though I've cut a lot of the frequencies away, just because of this boosting of our low frequency here, look at the meter out of our EQ. That's way closer to clipping red, right? And so we want to make sure that we're kind of keeping in mind how much headroom we have, because it's going to change the way our saturator and our glue compressor are going to function on the sound, right? So I cranked our gain up to 12 here. Well, there's your reason why. But we want to make sure that any changes we make like this don't push us too far over the line unless we're really looking for that distortion intentionally. So real quick here, we'll just kind of keep adding some EQ shapes. Now, I guess a little disclaimer, especially for those of you who are watching the VOD of this, not with us here live. My headphones are kind of bad, so I need to get new ones. And so if some of the frequency changes I'm making here, you're like, whoa, no, that sounds bad. Well, sorry. Cool. So we need a little bit of an accent above where our sub roll is so that we can get more of that chest pump. And you've seen me do this in my other streams where I stack 2 different EQs, even though I have some shapes or some filter bands left over here. I like being able to see these things in this way. And also this Ableton EQ is adaptive, right? We have this button that changes the way shapes morph together. So having them separated does actually change the way they mess with the sound a little bit. So there we go. We can hear that without our EQ shaping, it still sounds like a kick drum, but it's much less of what we need. And I think people don't necessarily realize how much you can do just with this EQ here, right? I mean, yes, we're getting a lot of gain from the signal just with this, so that's changing the way this sounds almost more than the EQ is. But bear in mind that I think a lot of people will get to this stage of the operator and be like, I hate the way this sounds. I have so many kick drum samples. Why would I even bother doing this? Well, you didn't quite finish the process, right? We have to go in and add effects to this to really get it the rest of the way there, and why you would maybe want to do this instead of just going to Splice and finding your favorite kick drum sample is because look at all the control I have over this now. And beyond that, when we're done here, I'm going to save all of this as a preset, which is then like a kick drum builder for me, right? I can then open up this preset in the future and go in and tweak things in the operator, tweak things in the EQs and the saturator and the compressor, and immediately have a brand new kick drum. This is also very easy to tune because it's a synth. So if I play the kick drum on different notes, we're not gonna have an issue. Oh, looks like I actually accidentally turned our course to 2 because I'm just like clicking around like a madman here. I mean, we've been building the kick drum with that. So let's see what it sounds like when I go down to 1. I like it on 2. We're gonna keep it on 2. That adds a little bit of that mid-end punch. So again, you have a lot of room to be creative with the way that you use this tool. Course essentially functions similarly to how our oscillator tab works here. You see we have these pillars, columns. These represent the harmonic series of an individual note or the overtone series. I hope I'm not using these terms incorrectly. And so they're fixed. So if I play a C note here, it's going to be C, then the G above that, then the C above that, then flat of the E above that, and then, it's going to keep going tighter and tighter on the way up. Course is essentially the same thing. I'm changing the pitch of the oscillator. However, each time I go up on the course, it goes to the next step in the harmonic series. And so the course knob, a lot of people think it's an octave shift. It's not. It's changing it based on the harmonic series, which means it's like the distance between 1 and 2 on the course is not the same adjustment as the distance between 18 and 19, right? Eventually high enough on here and you're not even moving by a full note anymore. So just something to keep in mind, especially when we're when we're designing more atonal things like maybe a kick drum or a snare drum. Doing some crazy pitch things like this actually starts to make sense. If we're doing more tonal things like, designing synths, not so much. So let's get back to this kick drum. I don't want to talk your ear off. Now this saturator is going to help us kind of balance the oomph and also take this frequency adjustment we did with the EQ and really kind of drive it home. But we're going to want some of the distortion created by the saturator, especially for the genre of music we're creating. And you can hear, if I push it above the line, this basically sounds like all of the trap kick drums in the trap sample packs. Yes, I am adding anyone who is creating trap sample packs out there because you're distorting the crap out of these kick drums. And what if I wanted to do that myself? Okay. So if we wanted to go that route, we could certainly distort the crap out of it. However, if we leave, a sweet spot here, you'll find that this distortion can be a lot more tameable. And I might end up using some of our external parameters here on the saturator. So one, make sure we're not clipping Ableton. Otherwise, the distortion we're going to hear from the saturator is not entirely accurate. Soft clip is probably going to want to be on. Otherwise, we're not necessarily going to be able to capture that distortion as well. And then we also have the option to adjust the frequency. This is either focusing on or telling it not to focus on. But for now, I'm just going to reduce the bass, which is going to cause this to not distort as quickly. It's going to give me a bit of a longer range on this drive, which means it's less sensitive, essentially. And I can more easily find a sweet spot. There we go. So I like the amount of distortion coming from there. Every now and then you might find yourself needing to add an EQ after the saturator in order to kind of take care of some of the distortion, especially if we did what we were doing before by just kind of slamming our kick drum like this. Listen to all this stuff. Like it's very, very present, right? So we might need to take this and find a way to pull away from some of those mid frequencies if this is the route we decide to go. And, or if we're trying to make something much softer, which we might do because this is the lo-fi kind of themed stream, we could just take an entire filter on this and cut those frequencies away. However, you'll notice when you slam the saturator like that, it kind of ruins the dynamics of the drum, right? We no longer have this punchy thing. It's just farty, I guess is the way I would put that. So we'll keep this on our sweet spot. Don't forget our output is kind of compensating for how much gain we're adding to our kick drum here. And then this glue compressor is here so that we can then tweak the dynamics of the resulting signal, right? Every now and then, like I said, if we squashed the crap out of this with our saturator, we lose our dynamics. We could get them back with our compressor. Or if we feel like we need to add punch, we can do that. If we need to remove punch, we can do that. So you might have seen different compressor settings that I've messed with here. I usually just kind of max it out to see really what is going to treat the drum better. So for example, maybe we go no attack, well, 0.01 attack, very quick release here as well. And we can see how much of the tail of our kick drum we maybe want to bring through. You can hear how That really just focuses on the like the tail end of that kick drum. The front of it, you can still hear it. It's clicky. But the actual punch of the kick drum is very much lost there. And so this is something you would do with a 50-50, right? So we can balance some of that tail with the punch. Now, that's not what we're doing here, but that's one of the options. Or we could help kind of increase the clickiness of this kick drum by having a quicker or a long or shorter attack, excuse me. And then, well, my makeup gain is wild here. You can hear when we lower the threshold, it eats the tail of our kick drum, right? So it's just very clicky. So that's not really what we're looking for either. Maybe a little bit of transient control so that this dial is hitting around 5 and then maybe around 10 for our attack is going to be an okay place to leave this. Cool. And again, we just don't really want to be clipping the outside. I don't necessarily need to use makeup gain at all. I'm just, it's quiet for me because I have my audio routed for Zoom or YouTube, excuse me, Zoom. What am I talking about? So there we go. There's our kick drum. It only took me like a half hour, but it's going to give us the platform for what we do with the rest of these sounds. Now, don't forget, I said that we wanted to add texture to this drum sound as well. And so, actually, I need to reduce this a bit. You can hear when the saturator is being pushed too far. So I could also just pull the drive back. Either works. Okay, so we want to use these top 2 oscillator slots here in our operator for the texture. And there's a few ways we could go about that. I could still use sine waves. I could go in and I could create a unique wave shape via our oscillator, like harmony or harmonic series partials. They're called partials. That doesn't help anybody, but that's what this grid is called, a partial grid. And I could create kind of, metallic tones from that, but I'm going to take a slightly easier route because it's going to help allude to how we're going to create some of our other drum sounds in the future, which is just white noise, right? So if you're not familiar, it's kind of like the sound of an air conditioner. If I blow into my microphone, it's essentially that noise, right? And it's a pretty full frequency signal. So if we look at white noise on an EQ, it's got a lot in it. It's not just bright high end like it might sound like. And so I can choose to operate on one of these frequencies with white noise. And there's kind of 2 options. We could either use our sine wave here and then operate the sine wave with a white noise, or just use white noise. So we'll start with that, and you'll see why in a moment. In operator, you have 2 options for the noise. Noise white, which is a standard white noise. It's non-tunable, so it'll be the same signal no matter what note you play. And then you have noise looped, which is actually tunable, but gives it a kind of like looped sound. I don't know. I still prefer kind of the basic white noise, especially because we're probably going to end up using this filter here to focus on the frequencies we want from it. So cool. Right away, you can hear this is giving this sort of like analog Roland 808 style drum sound kind of thing. And I'm okay with this white noise being processed with the EQs that we have here, because the middle aspect of this white noise is oftentimes going to be the part that sounds really kind of harsh on the ears. So certainly we could just take this envelope and, create a short snappy white noise layer, just turn it down a little bit. And there we go. Now we have a little bit of, brightness on the kick drum. It's not necessarily the greatest, but it's not bad. If we weren't able to generate a click from one of the other operators we were doing here, we could use this as such just by making this very, very short and loud. So it almost gives you that hi-hat on kick drum effect, but also makes it much clickier if we were doing like EDM, right? Like house music kind of needs that click to cut through all the very bright synths. But what we're really going to do here is treat this. The filter is going to be potentially a little bit problematic for us because of all these different, oscillators that the filter is currently affecting. And so, yeah, we're going to have to find a bit of a way around that, but that should be a-okay. So we want to set a very specific filter type here, which is probably going to be low pass. And we want to make sure our envelope is engaged. And you can hear how this is now really kind of affecting our white noise a little bit. Which is cool. But we can also use some distortion on this filter if we want to add even more to that. So I could go in here and make our, there we go, make our envelope a little shorter here. You You can hear how we're getting sort of different textures here on our kick drum. I know a lot of this is very much on the distorted side. That's because of our saturator. We could choose to walk that back a bit if we wanted to, or we could choose to blend this in separately. So it's actually its own layer instead of being part of this whole chain, right? We could always group this together if we wanted to. Open up our chain settings, duplicate this, and make one of these the high end and the other one the low end. Right, so now we have kick here, high end here, which makes that less distorted, right? Gives me a little bit more control over the actual filter itself. There we go. So if I play this by itself, kind of sounds like a hi-hat. This is going to be very similar to how we approach a hi-hat. But now that I have this separated out, one thing I can do is use a bandpass filter here. And if I can line this up right, you can see if I turn this up, it's very quiet, so I'm going to have to increase the volume here. But it gives us kind of like a, it almost sounds like the rim shot on a snare a little bit. And punch and click to the kick drum. So we just find a sweet spot on our frequency. It's fine. Find the right volume for it. All good. There you go. So we can hear. It actually does quite a bit to add frequencies to that kick drum that we didn't necessarily have before. So that's where I'm going to stop with this, because again, we've spent like half hour on a kick drum, but it's going to help speed up the rest of this process for us here. So we're going to create a new, well, yeah, we'll create a new MIDI, and we'll start from a fresh operator here. And this time we're trying to create a hi-hat. So there's a couple of things we're going to do here. Step one is we're going to create a little click, which is going to act as kind of like the initial impact of our hi-hat. And then we're going to create some white noise layering that helps create the splash of the hi-hat, right? So the way that we're going to do that is by engaging our fixed frequency options here on the first two oscillators. We're probably going to use the same routing we did for our kick drum. So we have D and C and B and A separate. And what this allows me to do is anytime I play a new note now on the keyboard, it's always playing the exact same pitch. And if I were to choose a fairly high pitch here and make this a very short sound, right away you can kind of hear I've got this clicky sort of sound. This is fine. You can hear how much adjusting this frequency does to the actual click itself. So again, just like everything else we've done, there's a sweet spot here. And this is really quiet, obviously. Once again, careful with your filter and your tone options. Otherwise, we're not really going to get the rest of this stuff. Thanks for the compliment, Simple Sam. I appreciate it. So you can hear that's very metallic, right? That's very kind of tonal. So I kind of like the metallic one. You can hear as we adjust this frequency, we're getting a lot of different options for how this sounds. It's getting squeakier on the way down. But they're fairly metallic sounding. Same thing, we could change this other frequency, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. And then multi, this is another pitch adjustment based on ratio. So it's going to give you either knocks in the low frequency, tonality in the higher frequency, or really, really sharp high frequencies. So this obviously to me feels a little bit more like what you might get on the click of a hi-hat. A little too much low end, but we have a filter here to take care of that. And use a bandpass filter for now. We'll see how this ends up working for us. AA from Rockaway. John, good to see you again. So yeah, this is how we're going to initialize our hi-hat here. And now we're going to use our white noise that we were looking at before to do the rest of this. Now this bandpass filter is really going to help us treat the frequency of this high white noise. Because right now, it's not bad. However, it's very full frequency. Like if I play this by itself, sounds very analog, sounds kind of plain, I guess would be a way to put that. And so that's where our bandpass filter is going to come in. So this bandpass filter is heavily going to rely on our envelope, so we need to increase this. You can hear how this is kind of functioning here. So we can use this to really focus on just the high frequencies, right? One thing to note is our envelopes are a little wacky. So this stuff has a release on it. We don't really want that. So we can kind of kill the releases of these different oscillators here. So that when I let go, we don't get that strange double hit there. Similarly with our filter, we really don't want much of a release here. So you can see how much we can get here. Now this resonance is going to have a pretty big impact on how bright that becomes, right? So once again, you can hear we can make something much brighter, much sharper, kind of depending on what we want here. But I think it's nice to do this from our EQ over here. It's almost a little bit easier to just take control of the frequencies we have. It's kind of tough to use one single filter band to handle it. However, this bandpass would do a fairly similar thing for you, kind of depending on how you set up your envelope here, right? So we're not necessarily going to use that. And then from here, we just kind of need to tweak our envelopes, right? So I like this for a short hi-hat. Whoops. And then if we duplicate this, we can then adjust our envelopes for an open hi-hat, right? So this is where we might actually want to use one of these filters here. Oops. I have to go the opposite, don't I? Yep. So if I this is gonna be a little weird, but if I increase the attack on our high pass filter here, what that does is it lets the lower frequency through, and then it snaps it up to the very top. And so what I need to do here is find the point where that frequency of that filter is at a fine place to hold for an open hi-hat. If I want to, I can even have it move and get brighter over time. It's honestly not so bad. It's just a little quiet. We have a pretty sharp click at the front, but we know how to fix that. We have saturator and compressor, right? So we're going to very quickly add a little bit of that. Saturator can be really handy for doing this type of white noise stuff through operator, because when we heavily distort high end like that, it becomes a little softer because those resonant frequencies are not nearly as present. So sometimes we can do that to really help kind of add that body to these sounds. And then primarily our glue compressor is going to be used to help kind of get rid of too much of that clickiness, right? So if we pull our attack way down, that threshold pretty much just captures that click, right? So we can pull that back a little bit. Something like that sounds pretty good to me. And what's cool about this is when I let go of the note on MIDI, it stops playing just like an open hi-hat would, right? So for the most part, we can probably copy these other sounds over. You can hear this saturator adds a lot of the actual room sound on this hi-hat. Without it, and then with. So it's very much up to us how we kind of want to blend this type of thing, right? Otherwise, this is sounding pretty good. Okay, so that kind of just leaves us with a snare, and that's easily one of the more challenging ones to do. We're going to rename these things. Kick, hat, snare. Sorry. Open hat. Here we go. Let's see. So we're going to add our operator here. I think while I'm doing this, now's a pretty good time to remind you guys that we have our giveaway going on. It's a Crystallizer, Arturia, or not Arturia almost. We keep doing the Arturia plugins. That's why it's fresh in my mind. Sound Toys, Crystallizer. It's like a psych delay, I guess is a pretty good way to put that. It's an echo tool that has a lot more than just an echo involved in it, and you're able to change the pitch of these successive echoes. There's a lot of different settings that you can choose to change the way that it actually functions on your sound. It's definitely one of those tools that's like like a secret weapon for a lot of producers and engineers alike. So yeah, definitely look into that one. I would be signing up for that if I didn't already have it for years and years, because it's just beautiful. And again, if we have a little bit of time today, which it's maybe looking like we won't, we'll throw a little bit of Crystallizer on our synth here and see what we can do with it. But first, I got to make us our snare. So we're going to label this snare. And actually, instead of just making a brand new one, let's duplicate our kick drum, because I actually think it's a fair amount of the way there already. Because we're doing a lot of the same stuff, right? I said that spending all that time on the kick drum is going to make it a little bit easier for us to conceive of the rest of these drum sounds. Move that over here. So one thing to note is if I take this kick drum and just play at higher pitch, right away it kind of sounds like a tom, right? And think about like what some of these drum sounds are in nature, right? Think about a kick drum. It's just a big drum with the membrane that you hit with a mallet, right? A tom is the same sort of thing, but smaller, and you hit it with a stick. A snare drum, same sort of thing, but even smaller, and you hit it with a stick. And then it's got the snares underneath it that go right for the splash part. And so really we can take the same sort of concept we did to create this kick drum and also pitch this up a little bit. And we're very close to what it's going to take to get us to a snare drum, right? So that's partly why we've done this. It definitely sounds like a tom. I could just go ahead and save this as a tom if I wanted. We already have this sort of like white noise click layer. I guess we'll just leave that there for fun. There's no reason not to. It's not hurting us. But we're going to go back into our kick drum operator here that we've now pitched up and make some changes so that the sound feels more like a snare, right? So one thing to note is our EQs are probably going to get changed. So I'm just going to delete this one for now. We're probably going to walk back our saturator a bit for now just to make sure I can tell that the changes I'm making here on the operator are what they are instead of being affected by that saturator a ton. And then we'll kind of go back and tune these to what ends up happening here. So certainly the snare needs to be splashier. So we can turn on the original white noise that we had in here before that we kind of lost. And this filter, not doing anyone any favors. Not using it for this. So we'll just cut that out, which means I can lower this decay a bit. You can maybe have a bit of a shorter decay here than you think, because when we go and add some of the post-processing to this, it's going to change. So this is creating a nice little punch for us, which helps. Sounds like the attack of a snare here. But this thing is a little too tonal, and it is too long, right? Doom, doom, doom. Now that's kind of, you've heard snares like that in more electronic genres, especially when distorted, but even still, it sticks around for too long. So we're going to shorten this a bit. And this might also be a pretty solid opportunity to use our fixed mode to find whatever frequency sounds best for our snare here, right? So when I switch this to fixed mode, I can browse through different frequencies. If I'm looking for like a deep, heavy dubstep snare, my resonance needs to almost be down where the kick drum is because it's replacing that emphasis, right? Boom, psh, like it's really loud. Like you clip your snare drums there. So, you know, something down here in the 60s or something. And our knock is a little too much like that, so I'll take down B here. Or if we're looking for more like trappy stuff, we can go a little higher, right? When we get higher, though, we might need to make this shorter. Right, so that frequency right there, mixed with the shorter white noise hi-hat, this is kind of like our, 808 trap snare, slightly. Sometimes adding an attack to our white noise helps the click and the punch of the actual frequency bit bleed through, because otherwise we're layering that transient with our white noise transient as well. So personally, I kind of like the lower frequencies better on the snare drum, so I think we'll keep it like that. Whoops. Like that one, sounds pretty good. Then we'll get a little bit more of a tail here if we wanted to, or we could do that with the other operator we already have down here, right? We could just go back to this, which is cleaner, and increase this. I don't like our filter anymore. Yeah, I'm just killing it entirely. There we go. Once again, we don't need that click. Just have that fade in a bit. Which is fine. And then we'll just add an EQ to this one by itself, right? So I can put an EQ just on this. It's in its own chain, and this kind of functions as the the filter we were using over here, but I could be way more particular about it, right? And now we can balance the amount of this. Cool, so there we go. We've pretty much created our, oh, right, this is still copied over from the other channel. So there we go, we've pretty much created our snare drum here. We just need to go through and tweak some of these different settings, right? So this would maybe be a good opportunity for me to add a glue compressor to the end of all this. I know we've got a lot of compressors going on, but I'm picking up speed here. And do that kind of very fast attack, very fast release trick that really accents the tail end of our sounds here. Synth tanks. So these are FM synth drums. Yeah. So we were building all of these from scratch, and very quickly here we're going to put these into a rhythm, since this is pretty much going to be our last drum. So we'll be able to hear these in a musical context very shortly. I know I've been talking a lot here. But operator is the tool we've been using for all of these, and so far the only extras we've had to use are EQ, saturator, and compressor, which I don't know if you've ever seen one of my streams before, but I rave about those tools. They're so powerful. We can almost turn any sound into any other sound just with this combo here. So yeah, you can hear what that does to our punch and what it does to our tail. So if I wanted to, maybe we could keep something like that and then just walk back the dry wet. Right? Leave us with the ability to add one more at the end if we want to, but we got to be careful because the signal, this one, is already very saturated, right? We're just using a little more to add saturation to our white noise layer, which is this, which we don't need too much, right? That could kind of easily add distortion we don't really need in the sound. So we're just doing this to help kind of glue all this together. And this is too loud and too long. Again, sweet spots, always changing it. And then this thing, I think the tonality, little too resonant. There we go. All right, this is good. I don't want to spend too much time messing with this stuff. You can hear that kind of helps accent the tail of our drum sound a little bit. So cool. I did go a little hi-fi, didn't I? I said we were doing these drums in lo-fi, so maybe for now I'll just add a bit of a filter here to help it sound a little lo-fi. I'll turn this off for now, but maybe we'll engage that later to help this sound a little bit more musical. And now we're looking to build a bit of a drum rhythm here. And so one thing to note is, yes, some of these drum sounds are like not going to change pitch when we play different piano notes, but some of them will, right? We can hear that. Some of these are clickier and sharper than the others. And also if we were to layer, multiple notes, you get phasing, which is sometimes nice. Not in this instance, but sometimes it's nice. All right, so we're gonna go real slow halftime. This is kind of like R&B music, so we might as well stick to it. And this is all still too long, so I'm just gonna make the snare much snappier. Don't forget we have a time knob here, so I could also just change the relative length of all of the envelopes in our operator just by reducing the time percentage. Right, short and snappy versus boosh. It's pretty funny. Actually, I kind of like it. We're going to keep the weird tubby snare. It's kind of nice to do to all your different sounds, I'm not going to lie, just to kind of hear what the variations you have are. Because don't forget, if I were to kind of group all this stuff together, which I did, we can go in and save this. I probably have one of these already. Kick maker. And now we could just go in, return to this, add some different, settings here. Maybe go in and change our time setting. Boosh, boosh. Right? So it's got a lot louder. So I'm going to do this fairly quickly because, again, don't want to take too much time watching me just moving MIDI notes around. I'm pretty sure this is meant to be kind of like a triplet swing, right? Something like that. Velocities work, so don't forget to change your velocities. So this is going to be our rhythm here for the kick drum. And for the hi-hat, it's going to be something very simple so that we don't need to spend time doing it. Again, I said we are in triplets. One thing to note, this hi-hat doesn't matter what pitch we're in, right? So it really doesn't matter what note we play on the old piano grid here. So we'll probably just do something very simple like that again. Got to switch some of these around with open ones. So we'll do the end of the second measure for an open hi-hat. And then this one as well. So copy this down into our open hi-hat spot so we can kind of remember which one of these needed to be open. That's going to be open. And this whole thing's going to be open. And we'll delete the rest of it. So that's our close and open hi-hat back and forth. Right? Cool. So one thing that would really help these drums feel a little bit nicer is group processing, right? So I said I wasn't going to go too far into it, but we'll do a little bit of reverb because it's going to really help, I promise. And a little bit of compression, certainly, to help balance these different sounds. I can tell my open hi-hat's a little loud. Ableton's got its drum bus tool, which can be used for a lot of different utility type purposes, but my favorite aspect of it is the sub or the boom feature. I actually completely get rid of the rest of this just so I can use this to make my low end much more resonant, especially for things like analog drums. All right, cool. So that's gonna be our drums. I'm probably just gonna leave these here for now. And we're gonna go take a look at our synth real quick because this was meant to kind of be the bonus round, right? So check this out. We're gonna leave this a sine wave completely. While I'm here, I'm gonna do a very quick side chain because it's gonna help make it sound a little better. Cool, that should be fine. Reverb on the whole song. No, that was just reverb on the drum group. So I put the drums in a group, and the reason why I did reverb, I didn't really explain it. I have in my other streams, is these are all handcrafted samples, right? Even if I was using samples from a sample pack, who's to say that they sound like they all kind of came from the same place? And so adding a quite subtle reverb, look, it's 10% and it's 700 milliseconds decay time. It's small room size, like it's pretty subtle reverb. Kind of simulates a studio space that these were recorded in and really makes them all feel like they're kind of coming from the same place. So it's just like a nice addition to when you're doing hand designed drums like that, because it really helps bring them together, especially with that compression at the end. So yeah, cool. We're going to take this sine wave and we're going to use Crystallizer only to make this into a cool synth. And I'm going to show you some different things that we could do with this tool to make it, and again, we didn't do any sort of sound design here. It's just taking that basic sine wave and running it into a Crystallizer. So the Crystallizer is going to do a lot for us here. So right away, if I just play this by itself now, sound is swimming all around our heads, right? And because this is a pure sine wave, we're kind of like struggling to not like phase and distort some of these frequencies. One way we could help that is just by adding a little bit of like FM processing and or a little bit more harmonic content here in the signal. Still pretty much sounds like a sine wave, but now there's stuff to resonate and so it's not going to get in our way as much. The other thing we could do is take this bass note and make it a different track, right? So that's going to help a little bit, because I don't necessarily recommend putting Crystallizer on your sub notes. That's probably going to give you more problems than it is going to give you nice things. So there we go. And you can see we've got, a mix knob we can do some cool stuff with. I can open up the tweak knob to get some more settings here. We have a splice and a delay knob. So this is how much of the actual signal is being kind of captured and then repeated at what, amount of time with our delay here. Recycle is basically feedback. How many times are we going to get extra voices being created? We can have them go forward or backward. I'm going to just chill with forward for now. Then we can change the pitch of these voices. So like if I go up an octave here, now we have a version of our sound that's being kind of delayed out an octave higher than the original. It's cool. It's really, really intense because I have all of this recycle going. If I turn this recycle all the way down, now we're only getting a few synths or a few voices added. So that's pretty cool. One thing to consider is we could certainly go a full mix here. And if we adjust our splice and delay so that it's not so long, we kind of get our original rhythm back, and this will help this blend a lot better into the actual sine wave here. The other thing we can do here, if I just copy another one or grab a fresh one, put it next to it, we could try some full mix options here. So if I keep this going forward and I turn our splice and delay away from like a MIDI sync here. And here we have just kind of now pitch control over this. This will be cleaner if I don't have loud signal running into these tools like I was. There we go, it's a lot cleaner now. I know it's a little messy and crazy. I think, what's our recycle here? 0, 0, okay. But you can hear, this has taken our sine wave, our basic sine wave, and definitely made it more interesting. If I cut out some of these lower frequencies here, and find the harsh stuff, give it a little bit more tameness, and then do what we're used to doing. Glue compressor. I'm not going to saturate this. It's still too sine wavy. And I'm going to go pretty squashed on this one because we have a lot of weird dynamic things happening from our crystallizer. Cool. So if we group this stuff together now, let's listen to what our sound was originally. Basic sine. Is this going to be a lo-fi beat or what? Yeah, that's what I said it was going to be at the beginning of the stream, but then I did kind of divert with the way the drums sound. So here's our new synth with the crystallizers. Let's run it in context. It also has this threshold option, which causes us to add more dynamics to this, although we don't have a very dynamic signal in the first place, so it's kind of tough. If we were to make it dynamic, we can probably make this function a little better. There we go. A little makes more sense. A little glitchy, kind of a little video gamey. If I wanted to make this feel more lo-fi, certainly I just need to get rid of some of the high frequencies I have in this. You know, maybe do some of these cuts. Maybe get the reverb going a little more. Feels a little bit more like it, but the drums I made feel more R&B, so that's kind of what I said we were going to do towards the end here. Kamikaze asks, is there any other plugins that are similar to the Crystallizer? Yeah, for sure. I would use the term psych delay when going and looking for them. Off the top of my head, I don't necessarily have one that comes to mind so directly, because, I mean, the one that does come to my mind is not going to be the one that I necessarily recommend you use. So FM8 is essentially Native Instruments' version of Operator. It has a lot more going on in it though, and it has an effects version, which means I can go in and apply this FM synthesizer to a channel, and instead of designing a synth with it, I can just go to the effects tab here and use the list they have. Now this cyc delay does something very similar to Crystallizer, so it's going to give you a lot of the similar controls. Now where Crystallizer, and to be fair, a lot of the other Sound Toys stuff shines, is on the different texture modeling they have. I don't know if that's necessarily the term they would use to describe it, but if I open up their Echo device, for example, look at all these different style choices here. This is how it's going to prod, and so you can use this for things very different from a full Echo, right? I could go 100% dry wet, switch the echo time to time, go to 0 milliseconds, and now this has just completely captured my signal with no delay and no echo, and I can change the style of processing to one of these different things, which is going to either apply a chorusing effect or saturation or filtering or a lot of really cool stuff. So they're just like, they're common tools. It's not like there's necessarily something in here that's like super unique. However, they do them all a little bit differently, right? So that's part of what makes them super appealing. Looked like my stream froze for a second there. I hope you guys are doing all right. So yeah, actually that's pretty much where we're going to wrap it for today. I'm always going to, keep what's going on, or keep the chat open for the last like 10 minutes to answer questions. If you guys have any other questions for me, now would be a good time to shoot them over. I'm going to play this piece of music back to us, and I'm going to make a couple of changes to the crystallizers we created so that they're not nearly as intense, and this is a little bit more subtle, so we can kind of hear what we've created today. Again, mostly focused on our drum sounds. That's really what we were working on here. Cool. So here we go. This is going to be our track, and then I'll say goodbye to you guys. Okay, so there's something happening here that I just absolutely cannot let go before I send you guys on your way. Look at the EQ on the drums and use your ears. You hear it? You see it? Because I sure do. This thing over here, look at that. Look at that guy. Oh my lord. Who made that? Did I make that? Oh, I did. There we go. Whew. That's going to hurt. Depending on what speaker you're using, that's going to kind of hurt. So there you go. That's whenever you see that, and you can, okay, no. Let me rewind. Whenever you see that, don't just immediately cut it. If you're hearing it though, if you can really hear that sharp kind of dog whistle frequency, you might want to go in and take a little swipe at it with an EQ like that. So there you go. That's really going to be where I leave it for the day. Gamagazi, okay, thanks for joining us, guys. Synth Tanks, nice to meet you this time. Thanks, just sub your channel, decided to hear music here on your page. Sweet. Yeah, so we have a few different presenters who do these 343 TV streams, Synth Tanked, so definitely check out our other instructors. I'm glad to hear you guys subbed. If anyone else is here with us who hasn't subbed to our channel yet, it's right below the video there. Don't forget to do all the good YouTube stuff, like, comment, and subscribe. Haha. All right. Cool, guys. So I will catch you at the next one. Again, I'm going to stick around and chat if you've got any other questions. So yeah, see y'all next time.